Touch the leg and welcome back to Tibet This Week, a weekly news edition on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's have a look at today's headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama interacts with participants from Howard Kennedy School. Sikyong Tsering embarks on official visit to North America. Speaker Khenpo Sonam Temple attends condolence meeting of Lama Lobzang. Officiating Sikyong Tharlam Dolma attends founding anniversary of Tibetan Medical and Astrological Institute. 27th Tibetan Shu Festival begins in Dharamshala. Kundeling Tatsak Rinpoche graces Inaugural. Department of Health organizes Open Marathon on World Health Day. European Parliament launches Europe for Tibet campaign. Arjia Rinpoche briefs Japanese parliamentarians on religious atrocities in Tibet. On Monday this week, His Holiness the Dalai Lama participated in a two-day Leadership and Happiness Laboratory Summit on Transcendence with participants from Howard Kennedy School. The meeting took place at His Holiness the Dalai Lama's residence in Dharamshala. Reflecting on the nurturing power of maternal love and the universal call for compassion, His Holiness highlighted the importance of genuine connection and empathy in fostering a more harmonious world. Professor Arthur Brooks emphasized the 6 transformative lessons from the primacy of love to the illusion of division, echoing a collective commitment to kindness and understanding. Sikyong Tsering of the Central Tibetan Administration has embarked on an official visit to Canada and the United States of America from 4th to 21st April. Sikyong Tsering arrived in Toronto on 6th April, where he addressed the members of the Tibetan community at the auditorium of the Tibetan Canadian Cultural Centre. Sikyong Tsering, during his address, commented on the long-standing struggle on Tibet-China conflict, where he said, given the uncompromising policies of Chinese President Xi Jinping, the immediate resolution of this conflict seems unattainable at the moment, and hence implored Tibetans to remain dedicated and pool their efforts and energies in resolving the Tibet-China conflict. Sikyong acknowledged that the goal of this visit is to garner support for the successful passage of the Resolve Tibet Act, which is currently making its way through the U.S. House of Senators. On Sunday, Sikyong Tsering interacted with students and teachers of the Tibetan Weekend School and held a separate meeting with Tibetan youths to enlighten them about the geopolitical and strategic significance of the Tibetan plateau. Similarly, Sikyong also convened representatives of the Tibetan Buddhist centers to discuss issues concerning Tibetan Buddhism, including the reincarnation of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. As part of his official engagements during this trip, Sikyong will meet with legislators, officials and other prominent members as well as members of the Tibetan community in Toronto, Montreal, Vermont, Boston and Washington, D.C., and is also scheduled to participate in a symposium with research centers. On Tuesday this week, Speaker Khenpo Sonam Temple attended the condolence meeting organized by the International Buddhist Confederation to honor Venerable Lama Lobzang, the founding Secretary General of IBC, held at the Samved Auditorium in the IGNCA building on Janpath, New Delhi. The event saw a condolence letter from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, speeches from IBC members and people close to Venerable Lama Lobzang. Speaker Khenpo Sonam Temple and Kaloing Gyari Dolma from the Department of Security, along with dignitaries from Ladakh and more than 100 members of the general public, attended the condolence meeting in New Delhi. Last Saturday, officiating Sikyong Tharlam Dolma, the Minister of the Department of Education of Central Tibetan Administration, attended the 108th founding anniversary of Tibetan Medical and Astrological Institute since its inception in Lhasa by the 13th Dalai Lama and its 63rd founding anniversary in exile since its re-establishment by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama in 1961. The celebration also coincided with convocation ceremony of the Tibetan Medical and Astrological Institute, 21st batch of medical doctors and the 11th batch of astrologers. In her keynote address, Tharlam Dolma emphasized the significant role that Tibetan Medical and Astrological Institute has undertaken in exile regarding the preservation of Tibetan medicinal tradition and rendering health services to the members of the Tibetan community and non-Tibetan patients over the last 63 years. Dr. Rashmi Agnihotri, as guest of honor, also spoke during the event and highlighted that both Ayush and Menzikang share a common goal and purpose despite their distinctions. The celebration also includes the presentation of certificates to graduating students, recipients of doctorate and MPhil degrees, and academic excellence prize winners, as well as recognition certificates to staff who have completed 40, 30, and 20 years of service. The 27th Annual Tibetan Shu Festival, also known as Yogurt Festival, began this Wednesday at the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts in Dharamshala. Kyabje Kundeling Tatsak Rinpoche Jizun Tenzi Chogi Gelzen graced the opening ceremony of the festival as the chief guest, along with officiating Sikyong Tharlam Domachangra, Kalun of Department of Education, and Deputy Speaker Domasrin Tekang of the Tibetan Parliament in Exile, and other dignitaries. Following a day-long display of each opera's stories, preview from the participating troops, Chief Guest Kundeling Tatsak Rinpoche delivered a keynote address applauding the members of the opera troops for their devotion and dedication to preserving the rich opera tradition of Tibet, and credited His Holiness the Dalai Lama for his leadership that empowered the Tibetan people. Central Tibetan Administration's Department of Religion and Culture provided a check of 1 lakh rupees to each troop group for their sustenance. Over the course of the 13-day Shoton Festival, Tibetan troops from various settlements will present different Tibetan opera performances, and festival will continue until 22nd April. The Department of Health Central Tibetan Administration observed World Health Day with an open marathon race covering 8.4 kilometers for men and 6.6 kilometers marathon race for women on 7th April. In close coordination with the Tibetan Settlement Office, Dharamshala, the Department of Health organized the open marathon to raise awareness about health and promote a healthy lifestyle. The marathon brought participants from all walks of life, from retirees to students, salaried to self-employed, doctors to homemakers. A total of 91 participants, 72 men and 19 females took part in the marathon. The World Health Day was also observed by Tibetans with various programs and activities under the initiative of Tibetan hospitals and clinics in settlements across India. The campaign Europe for Tibet was launched in the European Parliament during the meeting with members of the European Parliament ahead of the 6 to 9 June European elections. The campaign website eu4tibet.org will serve as a platform for all groups advocating for the rights and freedom of the Tibetan people based in the member states to obtain a pledge of support for Tibet from the candidates of the 2024 European elections and to question their political parties on their position on Tibet. The campaign was jointly organized by the Office of Tibet Brussels and the International Campaign for Tibet with the support from Office of Tibet in London and Geneva. Speakers at the event included Mikula Speksas, Salima Yonbu, Osra Medilgin, members of the European Parliament, Rigzin Churin Genkang, representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Brussels, Wangpo Tetong, Executive Director of the International Campaign for Tibet. On Wednesday this week, Reverend Arjia Rinpoche briefed the Japanese parliamentarians on his life experience in Tibet and the religious atrocities happening in Tibet at the Parliament building. While welcoming Rinpoche, Furuya Keiji, chairman of China's Human Rights Monitoring Group, invited Rinpoche to enlighten the parliamentarians on the gross violations of religious freedom in Tibet and his experience as a High Lama under the repressive Chinese rule. Rinpoche in his talk revealed that he was given a high religious position only to be controlled and used by the communist leadership in Tibet. When he was asked to tutor the false Panchen Lama and forced to do things against his religious faith, he decided to flee Tibet. Shimomura Haguban, chairman of the Japanese Parliamentary Group for Tibet, thanked Arjia Rinpoche for his testament and said it greatly helped the parliamentarians to get first-hand information on Chinese religious atrocities in Tibet. He assured Rinpoche that Japan would do its best to address Chinese repression in Tibet and southern Mongolia. Reverend Arjia Rinpoche is a Mongolian who was recognized as the 8th Arjia Rinpoche at the age of 2 in 1952 by the 10th Panchen Lama. Representative Dr. Arya Tsawang Gebo of the Liaison Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Professor Akira Ono of Shizuoka University were among the panel to facilitate Rinpoche's talk. The Japanese version of Rinpoche's book, Surviving the Dragon, was distributed to the lawmakers at the talk. That is all the news for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. Thank you for watching Tibet TV.